the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
You are Locked On Cowboys, your daily Dallas Cowboys podcast. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
Locked on Cowboys. Locked on Cowboys.
Welcome back to the Locked On Cowboys podcast, part of the Locked On Podcast Network. Thank you for tuning in. I am your host, Marcus Mosher. You can follow me on Twitter at Marcus_Mosher. And rejoining me this week is the great Landon McCool. You can check him out on Twitter at McCoolBCB. You can listen to him on the Best Coast Boys podcast. Landon, what's going on, sir?
Not much. I am refreshed, regenerated, I guess is the word, right? I had my regeneration days. And actually, I'm fresh, maybe not so fresh, but fresh back from training camp in Oxnard as well. So back from vacation and back from Oxnard, and certainly excited to talk a little bit Cowboys football.
Well, I didn't even ask you. Did you go out to Sunday's practice?
I didn't make Saturdays, but I did make Sundays. Yes, okay. I did make Sundays practice.
Gotcha. So we are going to talk about Sunday's practice because there's a lot to talk about. I'm going to ask you about a couple different players, but there's a few interesting tweets that I want to get to. First and foremost, I want to start with Leighton Vander Esch because Todd Archer from ESPN continues to rave about Leighton Vander Esch's practices, his training camp so far. I just want to know, what have you seen from him? Does it look like the Vander Esch that we saw in 2018 rather than 2019 and 2020?
Well, the interesting thing about Leighton Vander Esch, specifically, is that we didn't see training camp last year, So I didn't see the problem of what I didn't see any precursor in training camp of what problems he might have going into last season. So I guess to answer your question, he looks like the guy that he looked like when I saw him 2 years ago, which is good. Like he has looked really good in practice. I noticed him again today, especially in coverage. He just looks a lot cleaner with his footwork. He's sticking on people a little bit better. And in the run game, you're seeing him shooting gaps and making, it's tough because, again, part of Leighton Vander Esch's issues have been tied to his tackling and finishing tackles.
We don't see that a lot in training camp.
We don't see that a lot in practice. So that's the one thing that I'm still kind of interested in seeing if, there's improvement there. I really don't worry about that so much because, I do worry about it because I need to see him do it, but I think that he can return to form there simply because he is, a long-armed guy who's really good at kind of breaking down when he's comfortable with his footwork. I think there's just times last year that he just got played a little bit out of control because he was a step late in things because he just didn't understand exactly what was happening in front of him and his role in the defense very well. So he has looked a lot more comfortable this year, and definitely, out depending on where you want to grade Parsons on the scale of things. Has definitely looked like the best linebacker out there in practice.
Well, let's talk about those linebackers because a topic that we've had basically all offseason is what's the best pairing of these linebackers? Is it Jalen and Leighton Vander Esch? Is it Micah and Leighton? After 2 weeks of practice, Landon, what would you say is the best combination that you've seen so far?
Well, I think if anything, my answer back then has been confirmed kind of the more I've seen camp, and that's, and to be fair, most of everything we've seen up until, today's practice was the last day of install from what I understand. So it's all been install up until now. And we have seen a ton of different combinations of these linebackers. So, I think what we're going to see is in first down situations, Jalen will be on the field. In nickel situations, they'll probably take Jalen off the field and put Parsons in the game. But that doesn't mean that they also won't put in someone like Keanu Neal and then have Parsons rushing as a Leo or as basically a blitzing linebacker. They've just really mixed and matched not only the guys who the starters are, but also the personnel groups and how they're being deployed. They're not just deploying Parsons as a straightforward linebacker. So there are times when he's on the field and technically it's a 3 linebacker package, but he's a blitzer, he's a pass rusher. So I think if you're talking about who are, like, if we're talking about nickel package on money downs where they got to get off the field,
like 30
I I still think it's going to be Leighton Vander Esch and Micah Parsons or potentially Keanu Neal. I think they're going to have a separate role for Jalen Smith and clearly in early down situations, and then all other packages where they're going to deploy him in a specific way. But as far as like who's playing the most, it certainly seems like Leighton Vander Esch and Parsons are the guy they trust the most.
Yeah, I mean, again, all the stuff we've been hearing and we've been seeing about Leighton Vander Esch, it just seems like he's back to feeling comfortable in his own body. I heard an interview from him. It might have been Friday or Saturday where he was talking about he cut out alcohol and sweets, this offseason, and that's actually helped his game quite a bit. It helps all of us when you do that. So
yeah, exactly.
So it's all encouraging news about the linebackers so far. So
it is.
I want to ask you, staying with the defense, I want to talk about the secondary, Landon, because I think this is very fascinating. So another training camp practice, another Maurice Kennedy interception. Somebody who I think a lot of people wrote off. We've talked about him a lot on this podcast, but I actually want to ask you a question that our friend Katie Drummond proposed on Twitter. Do you think Maurice Kennedy playing this well and Kelvin Joseph playing pretty well, at least according to like Stephen Jones, might open the door for like an Anthony Brown trade, who I wrote it down. They could save $4.5 million if they traded him before week 1. Is that something that you are starting to entertain as a possible idea?
I think it's a little scary, simply because, you need as many of these guys as you can get.
I agree with you.
And I really feel like the way, look, I'm excited. Like I think, the best that we could have hoped for in the preseason, looking at this collection of guys is, okay, there's 4 or 5 of these guys that, if situation was right, they can have a good season. And all we need is like 1 or 2 of them to look good enough. And that should be enough. If that number ends up being 3 or 4, like, don't look a gift horse in a mouth. I mean,
no.
like just
you're not going to get your value back from trading Anthony Brown. Listen, even if it's $4 million, like, you're not going to get a player in free agency now at $4 million that's going to make a bigger impact than Anthony Brown, even as a 3rd or 4th corner. I really don't think so, at least.
And who are we trading for? You know what I'm saying? Like, that's the other thing too, is that I feel like they've gotten a lot of answers, or at least pretty good answers so far at some of the positions that they have concerns with. So
now, here's what I would say. To answer that question. If you're trading Anthony Brown, it's not about the compensation that you get back. It's about the cap
for the money.
Right? So, I think it would have made more sense if you would have traded him, let's say, a week ago. You free up that cap space, and then you go out and get Justin Houston. But Justin Houston's gone now to Baltimore.
Yeah.
I don't see very many guys in free agency now that you say are worth $4 million for one season. I don't think there's many of those options out there.
I agree. I think that, we'll see, with someone like Geno Atkins.
That's the only one. I was just about to say that. Yes.
But I mean, even then, like, I think you could probably figure out a way to afford him without having to get rid of Anthony Brown. So I'm not trying to get Anthony Brown off this team if he's going to be in one of his good season cycles, because when he plays well, he's, the years that he plays well, he plays very well. Yes. Like top level cornerback 3 level,
yes.
Like,
at a very good price.
Quarterback too. Yeah, exactly. For a good price, and just to have as a safety blanket until you can get Joseph to a level where he's ready to kind of take that job over. And then now suddenly you've got Brown you could slide into the slot. And I just think the gift of suddenly having a lot of depth at cornerback is not something that I would give away, even to save a little bit of money.
Yes. Any comments on Kelvin Joseph before we move on?
I thought he's looked good. I can't speak to, obviously Stephen Jones probably has seen more tape than I have, though I feel like I've seen a lot of the tape because I've been recording a lot of the practices. But, I think you've seen him. I haven't seen the huge negatives that I was expecting. There's definitely plays where I saw him give up a touchdown today on an inside slant from the 4. It's going to happen. But what I haven't seen is him look. I've never seen him look completely lost. I've never seen him look out of place. I've never seen him look overmatched. I've only ever seen him make a mental mistake here or there or something. But I will say this: he is incredibly gifted physically. The way and it reflects in his play. Like, he has incredibly patient feet. When guys are coming at him, he doesn't overreact to double moves because he trusts his athleticism. and that's a rare thing, for a young player. And I don't, I think that he's going to need some seasoning, obviously, to get ready. But I think that being that confident in your athletic ability and having that, that will go a long way early on in his career.
All right, let's take a quick break so I can tell you guys about Built Bar, the absolute best tasting protein bar out there. It's hard to even explain it. It's real chocolate with amazing flavors. It's just a great combination of low calories, high protein, and low sugar with no crazy additives. Best of all, they taste fantastic. Go to BuiltBar.com and use promo code LOCKED15 and you'll get 15% off your next box at BuiltBar.com. All right, Landon, we can talk about CeeDee Lamb and some of the other big name players, but we get in depth on this show. This is why people love the Locked On Cowboys podcast. Is we don't just talk about the starters, we talk about the reserve guys as well. This is a tweet from Todd Archer today. He said, some quick thoughts on practice so far. On offense, the most improved player is Sean McEwen, the tight end from Michigan. He's made some really nice catches, one of those second year jump guys. What do you think about Sean McEwen, and do you kind of, share the same belief that Todd does?
I certainly will say that I think McEwen has a real chance to take that tight end 3 job because he's shown up as a receiver. The problem with that, though, and if you want to talk about potential trade players here, the problem with that is that he is extremely similar to what you already have in Jarwin and Schultz. Yep. And he's not going to be a guy who's putting guys in body bags as a blocker. He's a get in the way blocker who clearly has
he loses slowly. That's what you're hoping, right?
Yeah, I mean he can kind of do that, but yeah, I mean that's the concern, right? Is that like if you make him your tight end 3 and suddenly you've got one guy who can kind of block, one guy who just really can't block, and then one guy who can also kind of block. That's not really, a diverse skill set to have in your tight end room necessarily. So, and then, does the question become, do you keep 4 tight ends? And if you keep 4 tight ends, then it
probably can't go long at receiver. So
it's a cascading issue. We all know exactly, what the twisters that you can tie yourself into when dealing with roster management. So the point is that they need to figure out what they're doing there, because they do clearly have 3 tight ends who I think can offer you something as receiving options. I don't know that they can actually be able to use all of them. So maybe what you need to do is figure out if does Jarwin need to be traded? Because can you get something? I doubt that you can get anything for Jarwin. Is Schultz a guy that can be traded? Is that something I'm certainly not advocating for that as the engineer on the Schultz train, but I think it's these are questions that are probably being asked because they do have 3 guys who I think are all kind of similar, who are pretty decent. I think could, do something on an NFL team.
Yeah, I don't think you're wrong in, potentially trying to explore a tight end trade. The problem is somebody really going to trade for Blake Jarwin coming off that injury and with that contract? And then for Dalton Schultz, he played really well last year, but is somebody going to trade a decent pick for Dalton Schultz who's going into the final year of his contract? Probably not, right?
And you're not saving money really if you're trading him.
No,
so it's not expensive. So
I think what it comes down to is it's going to be Sean McEwen or Jimmy Sprinkle. I just don't see a way this team can afford to keep 4 tight ends. If they cut Jeremy Sprinkle, they'll save just under $1 million, where Sean McEwen is very cheap. Maybe that ends up factoring in, because ultimately, how many snaps are we talking about per game for Jeremy Sprinkle as a blocker? 10?
I'll tell you this though: if they're going to do that, then they need to have another similar solution. They need to keep a fullback, because they can't have 3 tight ends who can't, or at least one of them can block. They need a blocking tight end or a blocking guy on the edge. Maybe that can function as a fullback can function in that role, but they got to find that. And if that means they have to go 4 tight ends, that's not good either. So I don't know. It's a tough problem. It's a good problem.
Just a very general question, because I'm sure there's people out there thinking about it. Jeremy Sprinkle really doesn't offer you anything as a receiver. So why couldn't the Cowboys just bring in like Terrence Steele or Brandon Knight in certain situations when you need that extra blocker?
I mean, you just need to be prepared to do that. Okay. That's fine. I mean, but at the same time, obviously that doesn't offer you Jeremy Sprinkle isn't a great receiver, but he will catch the football if it's thrown at him. You know what I'm saying? And that's the threat of having a tight end on the field versus a tackle. I mean, you could, unless you want to make Knight an eligible receiver. And hey, we don't know. I mean, listen, it's clearly been done before. So just remember to make him an eligible receiver. And
one more tweet from Todd Archer. He was actually mentioning that last year, Mike McCarthy kind of scoffed at the idea of having your 5 best offensive linemen on the field. And then we kind of eventually saw we saw it later in the year when they tried to play Zach Martin at right tackle. It seems like the Cowboys are at least experimenting with the idea at Connor Williams at center and Connor McGovern at left guard. Do you think that's just a practice thing, or do you think the Cowboys are actually considering moving Connor Williams over to center?
I don't know yet. I mean, I think, from what it seems like, they're pretty serious about it, because today at practice, they were rotating in Connor McGovern and Tyler Biotish back and forth, and Williams would step over.
Yes.
And so, they're at least getting a lot of solid looks that way. Now, again, that could be in preparation for making Connor McGovern the universal backup.
That's a good point. It might have more to do with McGovern than it does Connor Williams.
Or it may have to do with getting Connor Williams ready to play center. If you know what I'm saying, to your point, yes, it may be more about
it could be both.
Finding a solution to the backup situation than it is about someone taking Tyler Biotish's starting spot, right? I think honestly, to me, that still is my front runner, because I still think that Biotish is the starter from what it seems like.
Well, I guess the question comes down: do you think Tyler Biotish is a better center than what Connor McGovern is a left guard?
I think it actually comes down to, in this specific question, I think it actually comes down to the pair of the two. Is Connor McGovern and Connor Williams better guarded center combined than Tyler Biotish and Connor Williams? Because I have concerns about Connor Williams as a center. He's never really played the position before. There have been some snap issues at different points of practice. I think that as far as physical blockers, that the Connors may be like a better pairing, just because I think they may be better physical specimens, at least bigger.
Yeah.
But I don't know that actually translates to better performance on the field yet.
Okay. The offensive line is really fascinating because I don't think entering camp we thought there was any competition at that spot. Like, we thought the 5 starters were pretty much entrenched, but 2 weeks in, Landon, we might have a battle on the offensive line. I don't know if that's fun, if that's good news, but it's certainly something. I want to talk more about the offensive line in just a second, actually. But before we do that, I want to tell you guys about BetOnline, the fastest and easiest way to bet on all your sports action. Baseball season is in full swing, and you can track all of the action on BetOnline. Before the next pitch, head over to BetOnline on your laptop or mobile device and check out all the great sporting news, sign-up bonuses, and contest information. Don't sit on the sidelines anymore, as this is your chance to get into the game as teams prep for their runs to the playoffs. Head to the website or use your mobile device to sign up today and receive your 50% welcome bonus on your first deposit. BetOnline, your online sportsbook experts. All right, Landon, let's run through some rookies that we maybe haven't talked about a lot on this podcast, because you've been out to practice multiple days. You've seen these guys in pads now. What can you report on Josh Ball?
I just haven't seen a ton of noticeable stuff. We've only had – this was only my first padded practice so far, but I did watch some video of the first day. And, it's I think a lot of it has just been that he's been running with kind of almost the third team.
Which is not surprising.
It's just more that it's been a very tough evaluation, because the talent down there is there's actually a lot of disparity in the talent on the third team between the offense and the defense, because of the fact that the defense is, has a lot more players that play, right? So, like, especially by the second team, a lot of those guys are actually starters on defense, and on offense, they're like, they never play, right? So by the third team, it's actually even more widespread. But I've noticed him, but he hasn't like buried anybody, or I haven't seen him, do anything outstanding yet. But I haven't actually noticed him getting absolutely sunned. I did see him get beaten by Parsons at one point when Parsons came over on a one-on-one. But outside of that, I just haven't noticed him.
So has he mostly been playing left tackle?
I saw him at left tackle.
Okay.
Most of the snaps that I've noticed him. Yeah.
So
I don't know if that means he's playing both though.
I'm guessing that we're going to see a lot of Josh Ball and Terrence Steele at tackle on Thursday night at the Hall of Fame game, right?
Yeah, I would assume so.
That's good. That's a guy that I think really could use as many reps as possible. Like both of those guys, I'd love to see them just play the whole game. Like why not? Just give me all the snaps that I can see of those guys. Another one, Jabril Cox, because there's so much depth at linebacker. He's a lot of times the fifth or sixth guy going through these drills. I saw him get bodied by our guy Sean McCool. I think a couple practices ago. Have you seen much of Cox at practice?
I've tried several different times to specifically notice him, and again, another guy who is running with the threes. So it's tough to kind of parse exactly how good he is based on the talent he's going against. But I saw that same play with Sean McCool. I also seen him a couple times be really good in coverage, but again, it's against. The kid from Tiffin at one point, some of these other guys that are just down roster players. He looks the part. I think it's the one thing I will say that's a little bit concerning about him, and someone I think on one of the Cowboys shows actually mentioned this as well, is that I don't really see him a ton during when they're doing special teams practices, which that's not great. He should be like a core special teamer.
Special teamer, yeah.
Yeah, so that might be something to look out for. See exactly what his role is like in Thursday's game, because if he's not playing a bunch of special teams in the Hall of Fame game, they may not have a plan for him. And if that's the case, I don't know if he's a candidate to get cut, but what's he going to do on the roster? Yeah, that would be concerning.
Luke Gifford and Jabril Cox need to play just about every snap, right? I think. Do you think we'll see Micah Parsons in the Hall of Fame game?
That's a really good question. I wouldn't be surprised if we saw him a little bit,
to open the game, one series, just to get him going a little bit.
Maybe be the starter, right?
Yeah, one downhill collision with Najee Harris. That'd be a lot of fun. Any other guys from practice that you saw today that you would like to touch on? Because it seems like it was a spirited practice. They were doing some scramble drills in the red zone. Saw Keanu Neal get an interception. Is there anybody else you want to comment on?
We haven't really talked about Carlos Watkins a lot, but I'll tell you what, he remains the starter at nose tackle, and he had another pass deflection today, and he just seems to do the job well. It seems like when he's out there, he certainly has given some of the interior guys some fits at different points. So, I continue to be shocked by how much of an improvement it seems there is. On the defensive interior, based on where we were last year, Watkins, and now you're starting to see Urban a little bit more since the pads have come on. Those guys have looked pretty decent. That's exciting news for us.
It seems like those guys kind of know their roles, right? Like Carlos Watkins is not a pass rusher, right? But he kind of knows exactly what he's being asked to do. Same for Brent Urban. It just seems like these guys fit these roles, right? And that's making Randy Gregory look really good on the outside, because now he's just worrying about a tackle one-on-one. It's allowing Micah Parsons, like I saw today in practice, Parsons came downhill. It wasn't really a stunt, but he kind of shot a gap that nobody blocked him in and made a tackle. I think it was on Ezekiel Elliott, if I remember correctly. And that's because Carlos Watkins is occupying, two gaps, right? I do think they're going to be better there. The names aren't going to be sexier. I don't think any of those guys are going to get Pro Bowl nominations or anything like that, but I think they're just key parts to what should be hopefully an average defense. And the last question I'm going to ask you, from what you've seen over in practice the last 2 weeks, do you think this Cowboys defense can be average?
Yeah, absolutely. Absolutely. They look good. It's shocking to me. It's surprising to me.
They look faster. I think that's the biggest question.
Absolutely, they look fast. They look. The coverage looks unrecognizable. It's lots of people are covering well. I've never seen cornerbacks. This isn't even just from last year. I have never seen cornerbacks on this team getting their hands on footballs the way that this team gets their hands on footballs.
I've seen a lot of corners like peel back and make plays in the ball. Like, they just seem like they have a better feel than what they did over the last couple of years.
They're catching it.
Honestly,
that's half of it. That's there's the times that they're not catching the ball is when they're reaching across and slapping it down. Otherwise, if the ball's in the air, they're not swatting it; they're catching it. And that's surprising and shocking in a large degree.
So the Cowboys do not have a practice on Monday. I think they have a pretty light practice on Tuesday.
Yep.
Wednesday they are off. Thursday's the Hall of Fame game, Landon, and then I believe it's next Saturday, they start their first practice with the Rams. So things are moving. We're going to have actual football to discuss this week. Like, we're going to be breaking down film. Well, we might be breaking down film depending on I can't even mention them because we
won't even get into that.
It's a mess. But that is it for today's show. Thank you guys for tuning in. As always, you can download and subscribe to the podcast on Apple Podcast or wherever you get your podcast. Continue to support us on YouTube. You can follow Landon at McCool BCB. You can follow the show at Locked On Cowboys. You can follow me at Marcus_Mosher. Tune back in on Tuesday. We'll continue to answer some of your Twitter questions. We'll get into some practice notes, and we will see you then.